If you can't write complex sentences, you will never score Band 7 in grammar for IELTS writing. In this lesson, I'm going to show you what complex sentences are and how to write them, which is going to help you to improve your grammar score. Now, if you want to learn exactly how to get a Band 7 or higher in every single part of IELTS, make sure you check out our complete preparation course in the description below. All right, let's get started with the lesson today. The first thing we need to do is talk about what a complex sentence actually is. Well, a complex sentence is a sentence that has one main idea, independent clause, and one or more extra ideas, a dependent clause, connected by words like because, although, when, or if. So the main thing is we've got one main idea, and then we've got one or more than one extra idea. Now, complex sentences help to show a relationship between ideas or how they are connected. So now we know what a complex sentence is, but what about an independent clause and a dependent clause? Well, let's start with independent clauses. These clauses are a group of words with a subject and a verb that makes sense by itself. That's the key thing. It makes sense by itself. It doesn't need anything else. It's a complete thought and doesn't need anything else. And it's a grammatically correct sentence by itself. So let's look at some examples so you can see what I mean. He quickly finished his homework last night. If you look at this sentence, we don't need anything else. It is complete. It is 100% by itself. She made a delicious cake for dessert. Same again. We've got a subject, we've got a verb, and everything makes sense. We don't need more information. And finally, they are planning a trip to Italy. Again, it's complete. We don't need anything else. So they are independent clauses. What about a dependent clause? Well, a dependent clause is a group of words, okay, same thing, a group of words. It has a subject, it has a verb, but it does not make sense by itself. That is the difference. It is not a complete thought, and it needs to be connected to an independent clause to be complete. So it needs something else. So it is not a grammatically correct sentence by itself. So let me show you some examples. Because she was feeling unwell. Well, if you read this, yes, there is a noun, or there is a subject, sorry, and there is a verb, but it's just not complete. We need more information. We need something else to make it complete. While we were eating dinner. Well, again, it's not complete. We need more. And finally, if you finish your work on time. So just pretend someone says that to you. If you finish your work on time. Well, okay, but what happens if I finish my work on time? There needs to be more information. So these are examples of dependent clauses. So now let's have a look at some examples of full complex sentences. Here is the first one. I will go for a walk if the rain stops. So just have a quick think. What is the independent clause? What is the dependent clause? Well, I will go for a walk is independent. It's the independent clause. It doesn't need anything else. If someone says, I will go for a walk, well, it makes sense. We don't need anything else. And then if the rain stops, well, that's the dependent clause. I always take notes when I watch online lessons. So what's the independent clause? What's the dependent clause? Well, I always take notes. That's independent. It doesn't need anything else. But when I watch online lessons, that needs more. It needs something else. And finally, although I was hungry, I didn't eat the cake. Well, with this one, we have got the dependent clause first. So if you just hear, although I was hungry, well, it's not complete. It doesn't make sense. We need something more. And then I didn't eat the cake. That is the independent clause. Okay, so now we know what complex sentences are, but you might be thinking, well, why are they important? Why do I need them? Well, if you look at the official band descriptors, if you look at a band 7 for grammatical range and accuracy, it says a variety of complex structures is used. So that means to get a band 7 in grammar, you need to use a variety, so different types of complex sentences. So now let's talk about how to actually make complex sentences. There are three main methods. So let's start with the first one, which is using subordinating conjunctions. Now, the first thing you might be thinking is, what is a subordinating conjunction? What does that mean? Well, it's a word that joins an independent clause and a dependent clause. It joins them together. So let me show you 10 of the most common ones. Because, although, if, when, while, after, before, since, unless, as. Now, these are just 10 examples. These are not the only subordinating conjunctions in English. Now, have a look at these two sentences. I stayed home. It was raining. Two very, very simple sentences. How can we join them together? Well, we can simply use the word because. I stayed home because it was raining. So this word because is an example of a subordinating conjunction. It's joining these two ideas together. Now, you see here that because that's in the middle of a sentence, well, we can also swap that and change it around a little bit and put because at the start. Because it was raining, I stayed home. Now, both sentences have the same meaning. We're just putting because in a different place. Now, this second sentence, which part is the independent clause? Which one is the dependent clause? Well, if you had a chance to think, the first part is the dependent clause because it needs something more. If you just say because it was raining, it's not complete. We need more information. And then I stayed home, that is the independent clause. So now let me show you some more examples of complex sentences using subordinating conjunctions. So this is a much longer one. I prefer living in the countryside since the air is cleaner and it's much quieter than the city, which helps me relax after work. Okay, so since here is a subordinating conjunction. I usually read a book while I'm commuting to work as it's the best way to use that time productively. Now, you note here with both of these sentences, after we've got to the subordinating conjunction, that's where the dependent clause is. So since the air is cleaner, that's a dependent clause. While I'm commuting to work, that's also a dependent clause. Let's look at one more, and we'll put the conjunction at the start here. So although I like spending time with my friends on weekends, that's the dependent clause. I occasionally stay at home to relax, especially when I've had a busy week at work or university. All right, so that was method 1. Let's look at method number 2 now, which is using relative clauses. So again, you might be thinking, what is a relative clause? What does that mean? Well, a relative clause is a group of words that adds extra information about a noun using words like who, which, that, whose, where, or when. For example, the teacher who lives next door is very friendly. So who lives next door, that is the extra information. Now, with a relative clause, we need to use relative pronouns. So here are some of the most common ones: who, whom, whose, which, that, where, when, and why. Now, have a look at these two sentences. I met a man. He is from Canada. How can we join those together? Well, we can use the word who. I met a man who is from Canada. So who is from Canada? That is the relative clause. So I met a man, that's the independent clause. And then who is from Canada? That is the relative clause. That adds more information. It adds extra information. Here are some more examples. My hometown is a place where people are very welcoming. So we use where because we're talking about a place. I have a friend who is really good at playing the guitar. So we use who because friend is a person. I love visiting museums that show ancient history. And finally, I'll never forget the day when I passed my driving test. So we use when here because day is obviously a specific time. So these are just some very basic examples of how you can use relative clauses to make complex sentences. And also, they just make your speaking or even your writing much more professional because lower level students don't use these, maybe because they just don't know how. So this is one of the most simple ways to make complex sentences. Simply add more information or give more information by using words like who or which. Now let's move on to the next method, which is using conditional clauses. Now, you might remember learning about conditionals in grammar school, but if not, I just want to quickly remind you that a conditional sentence is a sentence that talks about a possible situation and what will happen as a result. It usually has two parts, one part with if, and that's the condition, and then another part with the result. So here's a very basic example. If it rains, okay, that is the condition, that's the if. I will stay at home, that is the result. There are four main conditionals in English, and we use each one for something a little bit different. So let me show you the different conditionals and what we use them for. I'm just going to go through this very, very quickly. If you want to have a detailed look, just quickly pause the video. So the first conditional is the zero conditional. We use that to talk about facts or things that are always true. For example, if you mix blue and yellow, you get green. This happens all the time, okay? It's always true. First conditional, real possibilities in the future. So something that might happen in the future, something that's very possible. If I have time tomorrow, I'll call you. So this is very possible. The person might have time. Second conditional, these are unreal or imaginary situations now or in the future. So these are things that are very unlikely. Yes, it's possible, but it's very, very, very unlikely and probably won't happen. If I was rich, I would travel the world. And finally, third conditional, these are things or imaginary situations in the past. Okay, things in the past. If I had woken up, I would have done it. Did they wake up? No, they didn't. So have a look at these two sentences. How can we join them and make a conditional sentence? Very, very simple. Simply say, if it rains, I will stay at home. So here, if it rains, that is the condition. Okay, that is the dependent clause. And then I will stay at home. Well, that is the result. That is the independent clause. So let's have a look at some examples. If I have enough time, I will review my notes before the exam. So here in the blue, this is actually the condition. I would travel more if I had a higher salary. So again, in the blue, we have got the condition. If people eat too much fast food, they often gain weight. So again, the conditions in the blue. And finally, if I had started my project earlier, I would have finished it by now. So these are just some very basic examples of conditional clauses, and you should try to use them where natural in the writing test. Now you know the three main methods for making complex sentences. But I just want to quickly share with you some common mistakes that I see students making with complex sentences. The first one is only using simple sentences in writing. Remember what we looked at the start of the lesson. To get a band 7, you need to use a variety of complex structures, okay? So don't just use simple, short sentences because your grammar is probably going to be around a 4 or 5. Next one, misusing commas, especially putting a comma after although. Normally, after the word although, okay, you don't need a comma. So, for example, although it looks like it's going to rain, we don't have a comma after although. Another one is just overusing common words like because. So instead of always using because, try different words. Although, while, if, since. Okay, when you're writing, always try and use a range of grammar, a variety of grammar, different words, different structures. Okay, this is going to help you to get a higher score. And finally, making sentences too long with too many clauses. This can actually reduce your score because it's going to make your writing hard to understand. And if you make sentences that are too long, they may have mistakes in them. So I would recommend that you keep your writing simple, but try to use some higher level grammar and also some higher level vocabulary. Remember, to get a band 7 for grammar in IELTS, you need to use a variety of complex sentences or structures. So if you do want to learn 5 grammar structures you can use to improve your grammar score, check out this video right here. Thanks for watching. See you next time and all the best with your studies.